Mark Jackson, Director of Athletics at Villanova University.
Okay, great. Well, Mark, thank you for spending some time with us to talk leadership. And I asked Pat this question, I'll ask you the same. What's your leadership mantra? Do you have an oath, or rules of leadership, things that you know that people who you lead know you're about?
Yeah, I think for me it revolves around my 4 Fs, and that guides really every major decision that I have, and that starts with my family and transcends to my faith, and it's about friendships, and it's about having fun. So those 4 principles, and they go into depth, each one of those, and I know them really well. But that's what guides my life, and I couldn't have told you that real clearly, I think, at the start of my career, but over time it was something that I took a lot of time and some self-discovery to figure out what drives me and what guides me, and it's a simple way for me to keep myself in check. If I don't keep those 4 things in line, I know I need to take some time and figure myself out and bring them back.
Interestingly enough, I mean, obviously friendships probably relate to your work, and fun will relate to your work.
Right.
You know, they all relate, but I'm just saying that you can get so caught up in your day-to-day that, you have to remind yourself that it's about family.
No question. No question. Yeah, because, I mean, to be honest with you, we work in a selfish business sometimes, with the hours that we spend and all that goes with that. You can lose sight of the most important things in life. And the good news is, at least on a college campus, it makes bringing your family in inclusive. It's an inclusive nature, right? Whether it's a fundraising event or whether it's a recruiting event, but you got to remind yourself to keep everything in balance.
You said that you learned that along the way in your career. Were you hitting any, walls, or stepping back and realizing when did the light go on?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I always had a passion and a connection to sports. I knew I wanted a career around sports. What particularly in sports, I wasn't clear on. So I probably spent 10 or 15 years out of college, I guess, closer to 15 years, jumping around between college athletics and professional athletics. Was it going to be, the general manager route? Was it going to be something entrepreneurial around sports? Was it going to be the athletic director route? And it wasn't until, my mentors really weighed in on me and said, hey, it's time to get serious. It's time to figure yourself out and get on a clear path. I was also married with 4 kids at the time. So this was when I was 35 years old, and happened to meet a guy, Pat Hayden, combined with a longtime mentor in Pete Carroll. And those guys both were really, really sure about who they were. They knew what they were about. They knew where they were going. They had set philosophies, and I hadn't figured mine out yet. And it was during that time frame with both of their influences that I realized that getting on the path towards being an athletic director was right for me.
What changed for you when you developed your own?
Became clearly more focused. I think that I realized, I realized a few things. I realized, number one, that the right industry, because if I go back to my 4 Fs, what's the best industry? What's the best profession that allows me to tie those things in? And for me, it was clearly college athletics because of the inclusive nature of it. It was a campus environment where my children could be raised. So it was the first F in family was checked. I liked the idea of raising my family on a college campus. The faith piece, and Pete taught me this, is that I had a belief that things were always going to get better. The best days were always ahead of me. A real optimistic way of looking at things, and I think a college campus is built around that. These kids between 18 and 22 years old, they're just at the start of their life, and the best years are ahead of them. So I could align with that. The friendship piece, it falls into a number of different categories for me, whether that's the fundraising piece, the recruiting piece, the cultivation piece. I think life's short. That you never want to go through life with any kind of enemies, and I think, again, a college campus and all the different types of people you get to touch is really important. And then the fun piece is the competitive piece. I like to win. Winning's really fun, and what a great opportunity to do that in this industry. So I became focused. I ruled a lot of things out. I knew the NFL. I had tried the NFL. That wasn't for me because I didn't feel it was as inclusive as college athletics. For my family, it was a lot of bells and whistles, a lot of perks, great industry, and it's great for some people, but for me, it wasn't a fit. So that's something that I ruled out at that time. And then, let's face it, we're all in higher education, and I don't think the majority of folks aren't breaking the bank. So it wasn't about money either. Where I think earlier on I pursued some entrepreneurial interests that I don't think my interests were really aligned with who I was. So it just became more clearly defined as to why being a college athletic director was a fit for me personally.
What are the bigger leadership lessons around this that don't necessarily have to do with sports? You can pass on to others that maybe want to skip that 15 years or part of those 15 years.
Yeah, take the lonely time, and do the lonely work where you really put your phone away, put distractions away, and this was something Pete was hammering on me for the early part of my career, and take the time to do the self-discovery. What exactly do you want your life to look like? What do you want your career to look like? Within that career, what should that be? If I'm going to be an athletic director, what do I want my department to represent? He went through that. It took him, being fired from, and he'll tell you this, being fired from the New York Jets and the New England Patriots, he knew he had one more chance to get it right if he was ever going to be a head coach again. And so prior to the USC job, he had a year off, and he did that. And he just wrote and he wrote and he wrote. And he clearly defined his philosophy. So I wish I had done that sooner. I wish I had done my self-discovery process sooner, because I think I would have made some decisions on my career path that were more in line with being an athletic director. But oftentimes the best lessons learned are the hardest ones. So that would be my advice: is to do the lonely work, right? Figure yourself out, because the bottom line is, if you're going to lead people, you got to know who you are and what you're about before you're expounding your lessons upon others, right? So until you do that, until you take the time to figure yourself out, I think you're kind of a lost leader sometimes.
Did you always see yourself as a leader, or is that something you had to step into and all of a sudden, okay, I can do this?
Yeah, I always viewed myself as a leader, but I hadn't done the work to really define how I would lead others in whatever setting that was. I mean, I read every leadership book. I emulated so many people, whether that was a guy like Pete Carroll, or I worked for Bill Belichick. I was around Jim Boeheim, Hall of Fame caliber coaches, and I think one day I'd like to be like Pete, and one day I'd like to be like Bill, but I had never taken the time to figure me out, and as I now get to interview and hire coaches, that's the first place where I start. Tell me about your philosophy. Tell me what your leadership style is. I want to know everything about what you've established in your career, and if theirs isn't aligned with mine, it doesn't have to be directly aligned, but it should be somewhat reflective. It's probably not going to work out, and because I want people that are about family and about friendships and about having a lot of fun, and so I think that's critically important for people to figure out who they are and take the sometimes lonely path of getting some quiet time and figure themselves out.
When you're looking for other leaders, do you want to be inspired, or is it a list of things that that you want to hear from them, checking some boxes, or you just want to feel it in your core?
Yeah, I think there is certainly a presence or an energy that I want to feel, and that's just me. Some people might want somebody more cerebral or more, internal versus external, and that's fine. I mean, everybody has their own style, but yes, there's certain qualities that I look for. But again, I go back to that foundational element of somebody that knows who they are and where they're going. That's really important.
I'm going to go down a few lists of
Sure.
things like change and that sort of thing. The first one's positive leadership, since you strike me as such a positive person. How does positive leadership drive business value or success?
Yeah, I think a positive energy, it's attractive to anybody that wants to get around your program. So I say this to everybody in our department, that everybody's a recruiter and everybody's a fundraiser. And I'm a firm believer in competing in every interaction, whether it's this interview right now or whether it's a conversation with a donor, whether it's a conversation with the equipment manager. For me personally, I'm trying to compete in that moment for that person to walk away with a really good feeling about whatever we just talked about. And that's hard to do. It's hard to remind yourself to get in that mindset all the time, but that's what I'm trying to impose upon my staff is, we have so many touch points in college athletics, whether it's at an event, a contest, at a practice, And I think I'd love to see everybody compete in those moments to make everybody feel like they're a part of something bigger. You know, I think it's one of the neat things about college athletics when you think about college institutions as a whole versus any other business in America. Think about how long-lasting they are. And so the universities are much bigger than me, or the premier athlete or the premier head coach or even the president, because they've been around forever and they will be around forever. So I want to make people feel inclusive or included in that, and I think having a positive energy around it really helps.
Now, there's challenges that come up, there's negative press, there's different things that happen, there's mistakes, whatever. Speaking about positive leadership, how can it be leveraged in difficult times to maximize performance?
Yeah, I think you have to look at the situation that you're in, whatever that situation is, and really determine what's at the heart of whatever the particular negative issue is. Sometimes it's a vocal minority, right, that can be really loud and can really weigh on you, but you can't let that impact the decision if it's not for the better interest of the whole. And I think that's a tough discernment sometimes, is determining what is in the best interest of the department and the program, regardless of what the vocal minority might think or what they might say, or whether there's a negative story or a negative article. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. How about change? Obviously, change has resistance. What advice do you offer in identifying and overcoming resistance to change to make sure they're successful?
Yeah, I think change is good. Change can be uncomfortable. I think one of the best things that I think any leader can learn is you can't pretend to have all the right answers all the time. And I think it's a relying upon others, and sometimes that means a change or a different direction is something that you may not be aligned with initially, but can learn to buy in. I want my staff to compete with me up until the very moment a decision is made. And then once that decision's made, we're all in this thing together. We don't go off of that. We're all in it together. You may oppose my decision, you may compete with me up until I make a decision that you don't agree with, but the fact is, once it's made, we're in it together.
I like it. Speaking of change and being about people, how do you engage people to drive the organization change?
Yeah, you try and build consensus, I guess, the best way you can. You try to get people to understand your perspective as to why a decision was made. And it may not be in their best interest, but it's in the best interest of the department. And anything that we try and do is to move the collective good forward. And sometimes people, sometimes here's I'm 6 or 8 months into a new position, and there are going to be people that buy in, and there are going to be people that want to be a part of the process. And then at the end of the day, there's going to be people that aren't, that just, we're not going to see eye to eye with, and that's okay too. It just, you got to be really honest and frank with those folks that just can't see eye to eye with you, and then sometimes you have to make some hard decisions.
Yeah. Communication is important, obviously.
Right.
How do the best organizations, how do you manage and leverage communication?
A consistent communication, I think, is best. I don't like surprises. I don't think anybody likes surprises. And it's funny, we're beginning the process, and I've only been around 8 months, but I have to go through this pretty meticulous annual review process of my direct reports, which right now I have a lot of. And the way I started one of those meetings is that if I'm having a conversation with you on your annual report and I'm surprising you with anything, I'm not doing a very good job of managing you. Because I think if I have issues, and here's a big one with me, is I can't let things fester. And neither should anybody in our department. If something's bothering you, I give myself a 48-hour rule typically. Like if something's bothering me about a particular staff member, or maybe it's an issue, or maybe it's a group within the department or a particular team, if it's still bothering me after 48 hours, I have to address it. I'm not going to wait till that annual review and make a laundry list of things and say, hey, look, this is what I was thinking 3 months ago. For me, I want to address those head on. So the more that I can be consistent with my communication and honest, obviously, the better off I think our department will be.
How about conflict management with communication, to create team harmony? It seems like, especially in your field, you have the individual goals, which are important, but you have team goals.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, manage the conflict between those two to create team harmony?
Yeah, I think for me, there's two ways you can look at it, right? You look at the team concept, and we have 24 sports, so typically I'm relying on the head coach to manage those issues between the individual and the understanding that you're working towards something bigger than just you. You're a part of something bigger. And I think the same lessons apply with my staff. I think you have to be cognizant of those individual goals and where somebody wants to go. And I love having those conversations. Now, as much as I want people, striving towards being maybe an athletic director on my team, or moving up the ranks towards being an associate athletic director, those goals and aspirations can't fall outside of the framework of the goals and objectives of the entire department. And those goals and objectives for the department are as clearly defined for me as my own personal philosophy. So there's really two conversations that I have pretty consistently. One is on the personal philosophy side about what I want our culture to be like, and the other ones are probably more black and white set standards about what our department is striving towards.
I like that a lot. That's great. As we wrap up here, what's the importance of being responsible and accountable to those around you, and how do you ensure that happens in your department?
Yeah, no, it's a big issue, and we're in a fishbowl in college athletics. There's a lot of people watching what we do. There's a lot of people connected to our brand and to our program, so there's a tremendous responsibility there. And at Villanova, we keep coming back to this word community, that we're all in this together, and we're all a part of something bigger than ourselves. So within that, there's some really big responsibilities that we're always aware of and cognizant of. And me as the leader of the department, I want to make sure that people are, again, coming to work feeling as though they're advancing their own individual goals, but yet still a part of something bigger than themselves. And again, I hope that they're feeling as though they can align with my own philosophy. And it's an interesting time because I'm just starting to implement it. We're still in this feeling out period after 6 or 8 months, and so there's a lot of conversations about who I am and what I'm about, and coming back to my 4 Fs and the objectives of the department. And the more that I get out and can have those kinds of conversations one-on-one with people, the better off we'll be. So it's an interesting process for me, but one that I enjoy, and it feels like a fit just early on.
How do you want to grow as a leader? How are you challenging yourself to grow as a leader?
Yeah, I go back to, because I had done this self-assessment or self-discovery process, whatever it was, 7 or 8 years ago when I actually went to go work for Pat Hayden. I think you got to continually do it. I think based on my circumstances and experiences now as an athletic director after 8 months for the first time, sort of a self-analysis of maybe there's other things I need to tweak about my philosophy or my leadership style. First time sitting in the seat, I can tell you this, the leadership discussion from lunch today, it gave me pause about trying to take too much on. Here I am, and I'm sure there's a lot of athletic directors that are sitting in the chair for the first time that want to take on the world, and you just can't, and you're better off getting your balances back in check, whether that's spending more time with your children or getting off your cell phone, all the lessons learned from our keynote at lunch today that really gave me pause to think, geez, you better check yourself here, get back in line with your 4 Fs, and are they in balance? Because right now I think probably so much more is focused on work than it is on the family and the faith and the friendship thing.
So the 4 Fs will never leave you, but there may be a 5th F coming along, like, or a T or something else.
Yeah, there could be. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think if you don't take the time to understand all that you're experiencing and all that you're going through, you're just kind of guessing. You're just kind of guessing, and that's hard to do. It's hard to pull yourself away. It's sort of like the 32 questions that he has asked every day. In my mind, geez, how can I get the time to do that? Where can I get the time to answer these 32 questions every day? But if you're not, you're doing yourself a disservice. If you're not taking 45 minutes to go work out and get away from your phone and get away from your desk, in my opinion, you're doing yourself a disservice. So oftentimes you're competing with yourself, right, in all those circumstances. So, and that's probably the toughest competition, is competing against yourself sometimes.
That's the value of having the conference we have, just to pause, even though each and every one of you is so busy and probably pulled in 15 different directions even today.
No question. No question. And there's comfort in knowing that there's, 120 athletic directors here that can share, openly share about their experiences. And I think these kinds of conferences here, where there's vulnerability, because it's exclusive and you don't have to worry about this thing being tweeted or, a storyline being written, is I think you have some really honest, open discussions that for a new athletic director, it's almost therapeutic to listen to the growing pains that all these guys have gone through at one point or another in their career.